How will intelligent automation influence each part of the global supply chain?
Blimey, that's a big question. I think, as I just seen in my presentation, the interesting thing is not necessarily the individual technologies, but how they converge and work together across the different value chain. I initially wrote an article in 2012 on this, which really looked at what happens if you step back and look at the value chain. Each people are talking about various things, autonomous vehicles, robotics, big data. The question is not what each one of those individual technologies are doing, but what happens when they join up, when they converge together. So I think we are, I use the terminology, the PAL supply chain, the personal, automated and local supply chain. And I think actually what we're at the moment is the stage where all of the inventions are there to automate and create a new, more local, more personalized model for the supply chain. What has to happen is for the investment, and certainly the legislation as well, to enable that to happen. So, as we probably saw with, the reason why when I do my presentation I use a lot of videos is because I'm actually showing that the technology exists. It's not science fiction, it's science fact. Taking it, diffusing that across industries and making it real is the next step, and bringing those together. The challenge for a lot of businesses is so the companies that are redirecting money from profit into innovation. So the challenge, when I help companies transform, I always say that the best companies innovate when they don't need to. So if you look at the companies like Amazon as an example, who are looking at this technology not just to make their supply chain a little bit more efficient, but ultimately to completely redesign the end-to-end chain. They can create new platforms, new ways of monetizing the platforms that drive suppliers and customers to them and make them the first port of call. And then, of course, when you orchestrate all of that technology, when you are the orchestra, everyone's playing to your tune, which means that the competitors now have a choice. We either dance to the same tune, we create our own tune, or we get left behind.
Said, what good is big data to companies that can't even manage small data? Is it really a problem that companies don't work with data properly?
It's not a real problem in so much as it might exist. It exists at a scale that prevents the vast majority of organizations from being able to take advantage of this. So I'll use an example. A few years ago I helped the biggest manufacturer in the UK. It's an aerospace and defense company. They had wall-to-wall SAP, so they used an SAP software. The data was unusable in their system, so basically no one was using the system to make any decision making because the data was so poor. No one believed anything was in it. They knew they had to compete, and therefore they said to their customer, which in that case was the Ministry of Defence, we want to show how innovative we are. So they spent around about 50 million on a CPFR, Collaborative Planning, Forecast, Replenishment solution. Very innovative, or doing ABCD analysis around stock and inventory turn rates. And the question, when they showed it to me very, very proudly, and they said, "Look at this, isn't it brilliant?" And I said, "I think what you've done here is fantastic. I think the level of innovation you've shown is incredible. The ability to predict and automate it. I have one question." And he said, "Well, what's the question?" And he said, "Well, the question that I have is, the person on the other side of that desk can't manage purchase orders correctly. You have set your lead times to be the same for every one of the 117,000 materials that you have in your system. Your MRP settings are a joke, your bill of materials are fictitious, your orders are ridiculous. What do you think is going to happen when this beautiful demand signal hits that slurry of poor data? And MRP runs and it tries to make sense of it. What do you think is going to happen?" And he said, "Well, I don't understand." I said, "Well, what's going to happen is he's going to use all of these incorrect data settings and incorrect decisions, and it's going to ask to buy things, make things, move things, do things that ultimately are not correct because the information that's being fed to it are not correct." So even though they spent a lot of money on innovation, even though they had a very good demand signal, they couldn't use it because their small data wasn't in control. The roles, the responsibilities, the disciplines needed to manage small data. And this is a challenge for most companies. Managing the data that runs the day-to-day operations is very difficult, which means that people don't trust the information, which means they build their own little cottage industry of Excel spreadsheets. And when you have that world, and you talk about artificial intelligence, then in order to take advantage of all of this new technology, you actually have to have control. The analogy I use when I talk to companies is, if you imagine the Shard. So the Shard is a very beautiful construction in London, a sort of skyscraper. The first thing people did before they had to build a shard was first they had to understand what the shard was going to look like. So they had to design a future to the state. The next big thing they had to do after they bought the land was dig a bloody big hole. They had to allow the foundations. Now, the digging of the hole was dirty, hard work, difficult, involved lots of effort, and the end result was nothing that looked like a skyscraper. It looked like a hole. But if they didn't dig the hole, the skyscraper wouldn't stand up. And this is the analogy I use for people who say, oh, big data is the answer. Big data is not the answer if you're not able to even articulate the question, because you don't have enough control. I always use the line that says you cannot control what you do not understand, and you cannot improve what you don't control. The opposite is therefore true. Understanding enables control, control enables improvement. Most companies just simply do not understand what is going on a day-to-day basis. They operate in a reactive mode. They are very good chaos managers, and they firefight and react on a day-to-day basis. The companies they're competing against now, to offer a 1 hour or 2 hour delivery, you have to be in control. These guys are so far beyond basic control. They've gone control into improvement and improvement into innovation. If you still don't know what's going to happen this afternoon, then what's big data going to do for you? I have no experience of companies in the Czech Republic, but I don't see why they should be any different to every other company. If we look at the vast majority of companies that implemented things like ERP systems did so because they either had a pressing need, originally it was the sort of Y2K thing, or their systems were out of date or unsupported, or they did it because everyone else was doing it. Only very few of them did it for a real business improvement reason, had a real sort of driving business case to do that. The reality is when you implement an integrated business system, you have to have an integrated business. And what most companies have found is their business isn't very integrated. So they've still got functional silos. They have sales, they have operations, they have warehouse and logistics, and they don't play well to each other. They have different metrics of success, they measure themselves in different ways, they have different rules and behaviors, and ultimately a lot of the times they lie to each other. Commercial lies about what its forecast is, manufacturing lies about what it's going to make, logistics lies about what it can move. So they don't, we have silos of operations. The thing that drives a lot of that silos is lack of cross-process visibility as to actually what's going on here. And a lot of that's driven because we measure things differently. If we measure things differently, that becomes what's important. So, if I'm interested in measured on truck fill rate, then I'll make sure my trucks are filled. If my production line is run on efficiency, then I'll make sure I make the stuff that's, I can keep running. If I want to sell more, then I'll probably sell, stuff that's more innovative, high value, but those don't work well together when you join them up. And that kind of is pretty much every company I've ever come across ever. Apart from the market leaders, the companies like the Amazons and the Unilevers and the Procters and Gambles. So apart from those guys, the 80% of the companies are in that world. They are struggling with managing.
You said that the global supply chain is still a human supply chain for now. When do you think it's going to turn into a robot supply chain?
Well, I think it will come in. There are certain phases of this. This is not going to happen. This year it's the human supply chain. Next year it's the robot supply chain. That isn't going to happen. What is happening is, and I do sound a bit of a broken record because I keep mentioning Amazon, but they are leading the way with this. Amazon has a human supply chain at the moment, but it is using pockets of technology. So it's used Kiva robotics in its warehouses. There's still humans in there. But they've gone from needing thousands of human workers to tens of human workers. So there's an explanation. Amazon is rolling that out. What it's doing is creating efficiencies that ultimately other companies are going to have to do the same. So, example, I think I mentioned in my presentation, Quiet Logistics. Quiet Logistics used Kiva robotics before Amazon bought Kiva robotics. So they were able to move stock and manage stock at a more efficient level than people who had a lot of humans. Amazon bought Kiva, took Kiva off Quiet Logistics. Quiet Logistics is now working with other companies to develop a Kiva replacement. So it's creating a robot war, a race for robotics in the warehouse. The thing is, we're at this invention stage at the moment. So all of these technologies, most of these technologies are at the invention stage. So I always use, if you look at the curve that I went through, it starts with invention. Some invention dies, they don't happen. Google Glass is a great invention that died. The invention was brilliant, but the social impact of wearing something that was recording, they didn't see that part of the equation. It died. Will it come back? Yes, it will come back, but it's died for now. Other inventions obviously make so much sense, they've got to happen. The thing that drives it is investment. And what you've got certain companies that have made conscious decisions. So Jim Collins in his book Good to Great said, Greatness is a matter of conscious choice and disciplined execution. So if you look at Amazon, Amazon is making a load of very conscious decisions about the business it wants to be and how it's going to win, and then it's following through execution. If something doesn't work, they drop it. They experiment frequently. If it doesn't work, they drop it. If it works, they do more of it. They have a culture of experimentation. Most companies don't. They have a hierarchical organization where the guy at the top does all the thinking and everyone else does all the doing. And those are the companies that are under threat. But they're going to be forced to play the robotic game, because if they don't, their economic model will be so much greater and so much more costly than companies do. So if you imagine, if I'm competing against Amazon, and Amazon has autonomous vehicles that don't involve any drivers, has either drones or the Starship Robotics, has robot warehouses, has artificial intelligence doing all the planning. And I need human drivers that only drive 8 hours a day before they have to take a rest because they're on a tachometer. I need human pickers, human packers, human loaders, human delivery drivers, human warehouses. My costs, my risks, my taxation bill, everything is far greater than Amazon. So I'm not playing the same game. So I've got two choices: play a different game or play their game, which then creates the exponential improvement. So what we're seeing at the moment is, and what I'm demonstrating is, this technology exists. As I said, if you're not part of the creation, you'll be part of the destruction. And unfortunately, certainly some of the 3PL companies will, a lot of the business goes through Amazon right now. It won't. And Amazon will suddenly we'll find they'll become from their customer to their competitor. And they have to adapt. So DHL has, I've done some work with DHL. DHL is heavily innovating to think, how do we utilize this? So it's looking at augmented reality, it's looking at drones, it's looking at autonomous vehicles, it's looking at robotics. It's having to, because if it doesn't, it knows it's just on a downward curve. So it's having to automate. So the factor is, do you want to automate or not? It's, do you want to be in business or not? I presented the more dystopian side of the equation, which is obviously the impact it's going to have. I think if all you have to trade is the things that on the end of your wrists, then the future's not looking particularly bright for you. And the question, therefore, is what do we do with the people who have very limited skill sets and actually very limited aspirations? So the problem is not so much not having a lot of skills, but maybe not having the willingness to learn new skills. One of the things that have come from technology is the democratization of innovation. Anyone can innovate. We don't need massive capital expenditures, but also the democratization of education. So now an African living in a village with the access to the internet could learn medicine, could learn psychology, could learn anything, because the entirety of world knowledge is contained on something he's got in his pocket. So when you have access to the knowledge, it comes down to your mindset. What do you want to do with this information? Do you want to play Candy Crush all day? Or do you want to, teach yourself? So what we'll see, I think, is a lot more specialization. People will have the choice. At the moment, lots of people do jobs that are not particularly fulfilling, but provide an income. The question is going to be, if the jobs that aren't very fulfilling are done, the dull, dangerous, and dirty jobs, as they call it, the 3Ds, dull, dangerous, and dirty. If those jobs are done by robots, the people who do them right now, what do they do? A lot of it comes down to mindset. The question will be, what do you want to do? Because there will be lots of opportunities for you to sell services, either through your assets, your car, your room. We're seeing this already, the gig economy, the sharing economy. It's already happening. People are selling, Airbnb. My spare room becomes the way when autonomous vehicles come, and my car, already Uber, my car suddenly is an income. Before, I used to have to learn the knowledge. I thought, well, to be a taxi driver in London, it'd take me 10 years of learning to become a taxi driver. Now I could be a taxi driver next week, if I'm an Uber driver, So the ways in which you earn money is different. The career for life model, that's gone.
You said that robots are only doing things that humans can't do. What are the things that robots can't do?
I can't think of anything. And the reason why I say that, and that might sound quite dramatic, is because every time I think there's a limit, that limit gets broken. So, the Albert Hubbard quote, every time someone says that something can't be done, they're interrupted by someone doing it. I follow this incredibly closely, and I veer between excitement and depression. Excitement at the rate of technological change, and depression because I can't keep up with the rate of technological change. You made a statement at the start there that robots are going to do the things that robots are told to do. That is changing dramatically. Things like machine learning is the concept of being able to, effectively a form of artificial intelligence, to be able to reach its own results without being explicitly programmed to do so. So this is computers figuring out things for itself. Now you've got things like cognitive computing and Watsons, and the ability to understand that there's been 7,000 pieces of medical research released this morning, and it took me 2 seconds to come up to speed on all of them. The ability to know the quarterly results of every company for the last 30 years. Humans can't do that. So from a cognitive perspective, they have the capability to do things that we can't do right now. We win on the physical aspect. So there was a law, I think it's Korzav's law, I might be wrong there, I think I might have pronounced it, but there was a law that easy things are hard and hard things are easy. So doing huge amounts of competitive calculations actually is a lot easier than being able to program something to pick something up and move somewhere else. The stuff a child can do, a baby, is actually quite difficult to program. But as you saw with things like Baxter, we're breaking that paradigm all the time. It's just a matter of time. It is just a matter of time. And if I operate for the cost of electricity, and I don't join unions, and I don't have cigarette breaks, and I don't get sick, and I don't need and sleep, etc., it's becoming a natural choice for a lot of organisations to say, well, if this doesn't involve a lot of cognitive power, it just needs movement of materials, then let the machine do it.
When will we use 3D printing for printing human organs or limbs?
Yep. Yeah, that's happening right now. It's possible right now. The cost of genome sequencing has exponentially dropped. You've got companies experimenting bioprinting all the time. It's the next frontier, effectively. I go way beyond the remit of supply chain, but certainly a lot of what I've talked about in the book is when you look at the ability to use genetic material and print things from a genetic material means that really what you're looking at is the ability to self-repair. What we are at there's a term called transcendence. We are effectively transcending our biological limitations, and that's never happened before. So the social and economic impacts of what happens when we both, can repair ourselves, but also when we use things like artificial intelligence to be able to diagnose and cure diseases and reverse aging, as I said in the presentation. Companies like Google, the SENS research organization, Project Calico, all looking to try and crack death. And by death, they mean the things that cause this intracellular damage, extracellular damage, free radical damage, things that cause cancerous growth. Once we crack that, you're effectively really disrupting biology. And that's the next big disruption. And the thing is, what used to be the case was that companies and people would look for business strategies and opportunities, and maybe if they're really good, they would disrupt an industry. What's happening right now is disruption is the strategy. And certainly at Silicon Valley, there are 25-year-olds that are just looking for things to disrupt. The next big threshold that people are working on at the moment is genetics. And in the moment, you think about the pharmaceutical industry, you think about the amount of drugs that are spent on to make sure people don't reject pig organs or to keep the biggest challenges to the progression might be the existing status quo, the companies fighting against that. Why have we not had electric vehicles? Because there's been a lot of money that people have invested in the oil industry, So the things that can stop us. The interesting thing is the democratization of the technology and the reduction. We don't need the scale you need before. Means I don't think they can stop it. I call my book Transition Point because we're about to. The first industrial revolution was the transition point. If you looked at the second image I showed after my title screen, it showed the evolution of mankind from the social and from anything that mattered, the number of us that existed, how long we existed, how much wealth, it was flatlined until around about the 18th century, and it just went straight up, and it's just going straight up. But when that curve happened, when we hit that transition point, lives for the majority of the people that were caught in the whirlwind, mostly in Britain, because that was the heart of the Industrial Revolution, was terrible. The life expectancy went down. Working conditions were horrific. Child labourers were used in machines, working the looms in the factories. Slum, cholera, The model had to be recalibrated. It had to have external influence. Governments had to intervene to put laws and regulations in place to protect the masses from that. And I pretty much think that needs to happen again. We will need to recalibrate. This will cause pressure on both the social and the economic models. There are people who are going to fight this tooth and nail. Society, I'll leave you with a snippet of the book. Society is going to split into three classes. The creators. There are going to be a small group of people who are going to be creators. These are the people who are going to be the master of the machines. They are going to create the business models. They're going to own the wealth. They're going to create more. Carers. There are going to be a big rise in skill sets for things that are to do with more human psychology and human touch. And even that gets challenged, because I thought, things like massaging and stuff like that will never be done by robots, until I saw a robot the other day that did that. And even that, so I'm having to keep constantly rethink. Carers will be a big thing now. The human interaction side, care and psychology, healthcare, sports therapy, fitness training. Because we'll have more time on our hands and less time at work, the service industry will grow, and that will create certain jobs. The rest will be consumers. So the challenge is making them consumers. And for every major empire, right back to the Roman Empire, the biggest challenge for the elites to be able to prosper, the mob has to be kept under control. And ultimately, most of us are the mob. We are the population. And in that mob, there are going to be three groups of people. And they're going to have three different worldviews. And I split them into this. God is God. So these are people who believe that God is God, that there is a divine being, they are formed in the will of God, and therefore things like genetic engineering, augmentation is completely anti. We were born in God's form and we should leave ourselves alone. They will fight against any movement that moves us away from Homo sapiens into Homo artificialis or whatever. The next one is man as God. So this will be the using of technology and genetic engineering to effectively make us godlike. We will extend our lifespans, we will become super intelligent, we will cure disease. So man will become effectively godlike. And the final group is machine as God. So the creation of what's they call ASI, artificial superintelligence, which is not just artificial general intelligence, which it means it's as intelligent as you or I and can do the things we can do, general things, but it can do the things that we can't do. It has effectively the intellectual capability of the entire planet. So there are people who are, at the moment, driven to create ASI, and there are a group of people who are absolutely scared witless by the concept of ASI. There are people called transhumanists whose entire life mission is to merge with machines, to transcend biology. These people scare me witless. If you follow them, they are hugely atheist and they scare me witless. The other group is that also scares me witless, because they are going to resist and reject. And if you look at things like the rise of Trump and other, this is the population protesting against society moving at the pace beyond which they feel they're part of the movement. So then there's a disconnection happening between globalization, commercialization, technology, innovation, and themselves. They feel disconnected. And when people are disconnected, they revolt. They find a way to protest, be it in violent means or non-violent means. From the French Revolution through Brexit, these are people saying enough. I do not feel like the world is serving our needs. So the challenge for society and the challenge for governments is to keep the population under control, keep them happy. If you look back, even right back to think books like Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, the population was happy, but there was a thing called soma. Everyone had soma, which kept them subservient and happy, because they were effectively drugged. I think the drug is going to be VR. I think virtual reality will be the drug. So we are looking at the Matrix scenario as a very viable future, where people say, I can live in a world, it's not a real world, it's a virtual world, but I can do anything. I can find the top levels of Maslow's hierarchy. I can self-actualize in this virtual world. I'm not limited to my apartment. I can go to any world. I can be anywhere. I can do anything. There are no limits to what I can do. People will choose to be in that world than the real world, and that's going to create some social issues.